All right, hello everybody. It's the Meista from Brews and Tunes. Cheers. I am absolutely thrilled, beside myself with excitement today. I am chatting with the one and only Mr. Glen Cummings, guitarist, of course, of notable bands Ludichrist, Scatterbrain, Stone Deep, to name a few. Glen, thank you so much for chatting with me. How are you doing today?
Excellent. Yeah, no,
Great.
it's my pleasure. It's
Awesome.
super great to be here with you.
Thank you. Thank you. So first off, what is going on with you? What's new with you right now? What's happening?
Well, it's just kind of spring. The main thing that's happening is spring,
Nice.
spring in New York City, when the urine smell kind of goes away a little bit and things start to grow in places that you didn't know they could grow. So it's like there's this kind of real lovely optimism going on. Life-wise, um, kind of just kind of working. I own a small design studio that's for about like the past 15 years. So we stay pretty busy. I do a little bit of teaching
Oh,
at a place called Pratt, which is like an art school in Brooklyn. So that was just it's getting to the end of the semester there. And music-wise, we've just been kind of ramping up to do a bunch of releases from the band Stone Deep, which is the band I did after Scatterbrain, like sort
right.
of through the 90s. So that's been really fun because, we always kind of did a lot of the stuff ourselves, but now you literally do everything yourself, like
Right.
uh, like on social media and kind of all this stuff. So it's also kind of been fun, like um, digging out the recordings, going back to the photographers, getting the photos, building the social media stuff, like getting cassettes run, getting vinyl underway. It's like a whole production. And that's what's been going on. And then this next week, yeah, next weekend, I'm down in Nashville. So that band was based in Nashville. So next weekend I'm down in Nashville and we're shooting a bunch of music videos, which is really funny because
Oh, wow.
we're shooting music videos for a release from 1994.
Nice.
So it's like, wait, what happened? What happened to time?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's with like a pretty cool guy down there named Caleb who runs a, a video production director kind of project that's called 615 Films, and he mostly does kind of like like gangster rap stuff, but he makes really like crazy videos.
Nice.
So we're kind of going to do a couple shorts with him next
Oh, very
weekend.
cool. Very
That's
cool.
fun.
That's it. It's interesting that, yeah, it's got to be interesting, going and revisiting, this music from the past and doing videos for something you performed, you know, 30 years ago. Uh, it's hard to believe I just said 30 years ago.
I
30.
know. Did you say 30?
Yeah, it's mind blowing. Anytime I catch my like, I'll hear like an album release date of, it's, like, oh, this album came out, like 35 years ago. Like, what? Like, it
No,
just came out, I swear. So,
it's really amazing that times gone by, and it's kind of amazing that some things still sound good.
mm,
Like, um, I mean, I guess I always liked music from the 50s and 60s, and I never thought like Motown stuff sounded bad
right,
or Iggy and the Stooges sounded dated, right?
right.
Like if that stuff sounded like it was just happening right now, even though it was kind of older. Um, so yeah, it's pretty fun to go back and do it, and it's kind of nice to kind of hang out with the guys that I kind of played music with again.
Right.
I have to say there's a certain thing about playing music that if you do it really intensely for a while and then you don't do it for a while and then you go back and reconnect, it's like, oh yeah, it's just kind of like guys making fun of each other and like playing, like actually playing. The act of playing together loud is kind of magical.
All right. That being said, do you think this will spawn anything new?
Oh, I mean, like new recordings or?
Right. Yeah. Or even like a show or something?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think that we have that band has a show coming up in, I think one in June and a
Oh, great.
couple in July down in Nashville.
Awesome.
Uh, but it's all kind of do it yourself. So that means calling up the clubs, negotiating a date, organizing everybody. It's like it's sort of back to square one in some
Right.
ways, like what we did like in the very beginning. But it's super fun. And if those guys can get back in the studio, if we can figure out how to, I think they're the kind of project's really been like we have a whole bunch of records that nobody heard. So kind of releasing those, and then we'll get the live stuff going again. And just along the way, I think we have like 5 or 6 new songs just because Ronzo, the lyricist, is he's like a songwriting machine. And so we just started talking about doing some of this stuff. And like 2 weeks into it, like this casual conversation, I just get these iPhone, like I'd get kind of like a message through Messenger on my iPhone. And it would be Ron like sitting in his car, like he'd been driving and he pulled over to the side of the road because he just has basically just sing the new song, usually with a whole arrangement to it.
Oh, wow.
And then I guess you just get back on the road and go to work. So I'm the archivist as well. So I just put those in a folder and say, okay, as soon as we get a chance, we'll get back to those.
Nice. That's really cool. I love that kind of stream of consciousness that he has in terms of writing. That's I mean, that's true art right there.
It's so
rather,
amazing.
rather
Plus,
than
it's
something.
like, I mean, we can talk about this more as we go in, but it's like it's really different than how we put music together in other bands, like in Ludichrist and Scatterbrain were pretty different constructs. So it's pretty fun to create stuff so fast.
Nice. Yeah,
Yeah, it just has a different
really
vibe.
cool. Yeah, I saw that and I guess it's been a little ways back at it. Well, it's this year that Stone Deep you guys released Nashville. It's available on Bandcamp right now, and I think you even put out, correct me if I'm wrong, did you get 8 tracks? Did I see 8 tracks on that? That is so cool.
Yes. Yeah, we put out 8 tracks. Everybody else was like, why are you making 8 tracks? I was like, it's so cool, man.
Yeah. Nobody's doing that. That is amazing. And yeah, different colors. I thought that was great. Kind of the retro, yeah, the 70s retro colored. That's so cool. That's such a cool idea. I don't even think I have an 8-track player anymore anywhere, but
I didn't have one either, which was pretty funny. I had to go get a 8-track player again so I could make sure that the tapes were good. It's like,
oh yeah, that is great.
and it's like, I had an 8-track player in my first car, which was like a '76 Dodge Dart, and I went back and I kind of bought a couple of the tapes that I used to have. Like I used to have Hendrix's
nice.
Band of Gypsies.
Perfect.
I used to have a couple Black Sabbath ones. I found like an old Funkadelic in good condition. And yeah, I mean, 8-tracks sound really, really freaky.
Yeah,
because
it's
usually the 8-track players only have one speaker.
Right.
So it's like the tapes are stereo, because it's actually 4 tracks, 4 stereo tracks.
Yeah.
Why they call it 8-track. But then most machines just have a mono speaker.
Right.
2 channels just pump it into one speaker. Like, oh well.
Yeah, it's so cool that you guys did that. I think that's great. That's great. And that's the Nashville album, which is excellent, by the way. Great material on that album. And for those that aren't familiar with Stone Deep, and I hate putting labels on music, but what I love about the band is it's kind of this metal, kind of a hybrid metal rock rap funk fusion vibe going on. There's just so much cool stuff happening with that, and as you said, the lyricism is excellent, and it just fits so well with the music. I really love it. I think it's really cool. And as you mentioned, you were mentioning some bands before. I think it's timeless. It feels very fresh, and it's amazing to think that a lot of the stuff was, it's 30 years old, but it feels very relevant to, especially lyrically. I think it's relevant to what's happening in the world right now. We won't get into the political climate right now, but I mean, I think a lot of the music that you did, but with all of the bands that you've been in, a lot of it's relevant to, kind of, this human struggle that we live in as modern people, and we don't seem to ever figure out.
That's the amazing part. It's like, we kind of do it, and like if it gets figured out, it gets unfigured out, and then we go through it again.
And I tend to listen to, and I've read this before, and I don't know if I buy into it exactly, but kind of the music that shaped you a lot of times is the formative years, your teen years, and you kind of go back to that a lot. At least in this article I read, kind of the social experiment. And I agree to some extent, but I can see that. And then realizing I do listen to a lot of, crossover thrash metal and stuff that I was listening to as a teenager. And it's frightening to see how relevant those lyrics are now.
Yeah, exactly. It's really funny. It's funny to go back to the Ludichrist stuff and the Scatterbrain stuff, and with this the thing about the Stone Deep stuff too. It's like when we were playing in the early '90s, like a lot of people would say, "Oh, like rap rock stuff that's over. Like that's so like 4 years ago, or like like it's just not it's just old. It came and it went already." And we were like, I'm pretty sure it didn't, like we're still here and we're doing it. And then it's so funny, like 30 years later, where it almost feels like almost feels more in the right time, like now, than it kind of did then. Not that we were like, I mean, we were just kind of playing what we thought was good, but it almost, like I do a little bit of teaching, and like if you do any teaching, you have to have an attitude toward it. My attitude is, I'll tell you whatever you want to know, and students always find out stuff, right? So like, are you in a band? Were you in a band? Like, yeah, I was in a band, a couple bands. You want to check it out? I'll give you kind of, I'll give you the music, or I'll give you, send you the stuff to check out. And that's usually a pretty bad idea, because then the students say, "Oh, that sounds so old-fashioned," or whatever. And some of the students were like, "That sounds like I actually like it. Like, we actually listen to it." And I was like, "Well, I know you're brutally honest, so that's kind of amazing."
That's cool though. I can't even imagine, like, if I went into a classroom and as a 20-something, and my teacher is the guitar player from Ludichrist, I'd be like, "Oh my god, this is amazing!" Yeah, that's incredible. That's cool though. That's and I like the fact that that they enjoy the music. That brings me hope.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I mean, like young people are pretty like I don't know how old you are. I'm 57 now, and it was like a big deal. Like if you were into like hardcore, or you were into thrashcore, that meant like you allegedly rejected all this other stuff that it was like things were genred a bit, like
Right.
if you went to metal concerts, you wouldn't go to a disco, or if you went to, I tried to go to everything, any and everything I could, but I think kids now, well, I think young people, I shouldn't say kids. I think young people now, like, they don't really see distinctions like that. If
Yeah.
they like it, then they just like it, and it's like it doesn't matter if it's super heavy, satanic, Finnish, bleeding from the eyes death metal, or if it's the new Katy Perry, and
Right.
actually totally just put it in the same playlist together because
Right. Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah, I think I like, yeah, my children, my two natural children and my stepson, they all are in their early 20s, and yeah, I find, yeah, they listen to everything. And I listen to a lot of different stuff, but I think they have a much wider breadth of taste than I do. I'm pretty much a metalhead and a rocker, even though I do listen to some other stuff, jazz and things like that. But for the most part, I'm a rocker, and they listen to everything and anything, and it's, which I have a lot of respect for. It's cool. I don't know how they keep any of it straight, but it's kind of mine. But it's interesting though. It's interesting you say that, because I didn't, I guess I didn't get it as a youngster because I was a moron. But I just liked heavy music, and so like Ludichrist was heavy, but now listening to it, I pick up things that, I mean, it's still very heavy and thrash forward, but particularly like you look at Power Trip, there's, for me anyway, I hear jazz, I hear funk, I hear all sorts of things happening that I guess I didn't pick up on as a kid so much, where now I'm like, oh wow, listen, because I'm listening more to time signatures and things like that, tempos and things like that. I'm like, wow, they're doing all sorts of crazy stuff, and in this one song, it's like, it's almost like fusion. It's really cool.
Yeah, Power Trip was a really interesting album. I mean, I've been kind of posting a bunch of stuff on Facebook about Ludichrist, mostly about Ludichrist, and then it's veered into Scatterbrain because it kind of always does. But the Power Trip moment was like, oh, well, the thing I wanted to say was, what's been interesting is there's a bunch of people who've joined the conversation and reminded me of stuff that I totally had forgotten, because why would I remember it, right?
Right.
And at some point, the first version of Ludichrist, or the version that was on Immaculate Deception, like people were kind of in and out of the band. We went through like maybe 3 or 4 people came, and like each one kind of had some influence on stuff. And the big change was, well, Mark Canabrocki was really the first guitar player, and then he left after we did like a CBGB's tape. And this other guy who's really good guitar player as well, named Joe Butcher, came on board, and he kind of contributed a song or two, and his playing style. And then at some point, after a string of shows, Joe left to go do his own stuff too. And we were like, okay, we got to get another, like we had really become a 2-guitar band at that point. I mean, Ludichrist started off as really 1-guitar band, and then after a while, we had songs that had most basic things. They just had 2 guitar parts. So whether you wanted them or not, like probably should have 2 guitar players. So I can't remember if we put an ad in the newspaper. This is how long ago this is. People put ads in newspapers
Right.
to
Yeah.
find people, right? And we connected with Paul Nieder, and Paul was really like, he was like he had gone to music school. He was kind of I mean, I think at that point he made his living by giving guitar lessons. So he was like, he was really into Al Di Meola and Carlos Santana, and kind of like stuff that was fast and aggressive, but wasn't metal, like wasn't necessarily metal, and it wasn't hardcore. And I think all of us just connected because it was what was nice is like I was trying to bring rock stuff into Ludichrist when I first started, you know, and counter rhythms and stuff. And then with Paul, it was like, okay, I was trying to up our game, and then basically Paul had a whole different thing, you know. It's like I didn't know. I wasn't a Dixie Dregs fan or a fan of kind of all these things. I was like, this stuff is great.
Right.
So Paul kind of you know, could kind of keep up with kind of, you know, I mean, he had to kind of adapt to like become more metally than rock, which I think he really enjoyed. And then kind of when we kind of started putting stuff together, like we could kind of write different parts of songs, or he would write a song and then I'd contribute a little part, or I'd have a song and he'd say, you need a more dissident part here. How about this, you know, horrible thing in like 7/9 or something, and be like, oh, that was fantastic. So we could kind of put those things together. And then we wound up with Dave Miranda on drums, and Dave was just his own animal. He had a band. He had another band he was playing with called the Six in Violence, who are a really interesting band. And for the Six in Violence, Dave kind of played like he did on Power Trip, but he also would play a part of the set with a marching drum kit that he would put on, that we'd strap on his body, and then he would stage dive with the marching kit on. It was just like,
holy shit.
which is like, I don't even know what's happening. Right? So they were, I mean, I'll see if I can dig up some of their stuff. They were pretty good. So Dave was like, Dave wasn't real, like, Dave was like, you would call him like an extreme drummer. Like he wasn't a metal guy, or he wasn't like a hardcore guy. He was just like, yeah, man. Like, let's just make it more intense, you know? Like, so that mix of people was pretty great, because yeah, we could kind of try to bring a lot of different stuff together. And if Paul and I had some stuff going on, then Dave would always like make it more, you know, it wasn't like Dave didn't play the role of the anchor. Like he would kind of anchor the groove, but he was just more like, he really was more like a jazz drummer, where there's like a song and then he played in relationship to it. Okay. And made like and made kind of more accents. So Dave was amazing, and the Power Trip album grew out of that kind of group of people, and Mike Walters on bass as well. Mike was like probably the steady of us of us all. I don't know if you've come across Mike. Basically, Mike's kind of like one of the people who said the least words in our relationship. He would be like, he'd sit there, he'd learn the parts. Yeah. How about this? Yeah. Like, he was super smart, but he was just like, he would get it all done with like 5 words. Like, yeah.
Nice.
Okay. So yeah, that was the lineup for kind of Power Trip, and some crazy tunes on there, like Zad, or This Party Sucks, and I don't know why. Like, it's hard to say like why they became so eclectic. I think this is a weird thing for somebody who's like in a thrash or considered a crossover thrash band. I think we're listening to like a lot of Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Like Yes, like Tales of Topographic Oceans, or like, I can't remember what, but like we were listening to stuff that had a lot of different parts, and it just seemed like I mean, hardcore always had like the fast part and the slow part,
Right.
the intro, and like, because we didn't, I mean, Paul's background was more kind of like music in general. It wasn't like pop music. Like none of us were really pop music people. So for a song to have 3 different bridges
Yeah.
seemed pretty good to us, you know. Like I don't see any problem with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think
Um,
that's what I've always found attractive about the music is yeah, I mean, it's aggressive and it's hardcore, but it's also experimental. It's artistic, without being pretentious, but really interesting. Like when you really, I mean, you can bang your head to it and all you want, but if you really listen to it, there's a lot happening and a lot of really interesting passages and transitions and I'm not a musician, so I'm
right.
kind of just saying what I think I hear. But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I love it. I think it's great. Yeah, and you mentioned, yeah, This Party Sucks has so many things happening, and it's such a fun song to listen to as a listener. But it's a fascinating song to listen to as a listener too, because it's a funny song. Lyrically it's funny, but then there's a lot of really cool stuff happening. Like yeah, kind of this jazz, progressive rock vibe to it as well.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating. Yeah, so that was one thing I definitely wanted to ask you about is, yeah, kind of um the musical, where everybody was coming from musically, because it seems like there's a lot of different like pieces coming into this and a lot of different talent and interests, which I found fascinating from the get-go. That being said, I'm really curious about, if we go in the way, take, in the Wayback Machine, um, did you come from a musical family? Like, what was your musical path? When did you start playing guitar?
Yeah, I mean, no, nobody in my family played music. My mom liked music, but like like our relationship to music was like going around to garage sales and like buying used records and singles and stuff. And we just used to buy tons of stuff. So,
Cool.
like novelty records, comedy records, just any junk that people were selling for like 5 cents when their kids went away to college or
All
whatever.
right.
But I always I question whether my memory's right, but I got interested in. I had a friend named Brian Rodney in Bethpage, and his older brother must have been going to college, like was college age. We were like in probably in going into junior high school or something, like 7th grade.
Mhm.
And he had an older brother who was like into punk rock stuff, and we were probably just getting into like Kiss, you know, like because it seemed crazy or whatever. And he was into the Ramones, and he was into the Dictators, and he was into the MC5, and he was into, a whole bunch of bands that like the Vibrators and TRB5, Tom Robinson Band, and like things that were kind of punk, hard rock, heading that way. And he took us to go see the Ramones when they played at this local college called CW Post Long Island University. So I think we were in 7th grade, and he like snuck us into the college, and we saw the Ramones. I
Wow.
was like, holy shit, that's like amazing, because I don't think we had ever been to a concert before.
Wow.
And then I was like, I'm totally doing this. So so starting probably in 7th grade, like I convinced my parents to get me I wanted to be a bass player first, and then pretty soon I just switched to guitar, probably in like 6 months. And I had like bands on my block, like like a couple of the guys I was friends with. We put a band together and played like whatever riffs we thought we could do. We do like Alice Cooper's Schools Out. Din,
Oh,
din,
cool.
din, 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 din. We do that for about 40 minutes.
Nice.
Sounds good. Learned some Ramones songs, some stuff. And so I had bands like that, like local bands through high school. And then, I got really into hardcore when there started to be hardcore shows on like the local college radio, which I can't remember if that would have been Fordham. Again, I was in the middle of Long Island, but you could get NYU's signal out there, believe it or not.
Nice.
So we got all that stuff. And then I would like go in to go see shows on the weekends or even during the week with some of my friends who got into it too. And I guess in like 1983, I started going to school in New York, and by then I had a couple friends who were like, people who hung around at hardcore shows. So I think summer of 83, one of my friends, who is a guy named John Wiley, said, hey, I got this, I met these guys, they have a band called Rapid Deployment, and they need a singer, and I'm going to audition as a singer, but they said they also need a guitar player. Do you want to audition as a guitar player? And I was like, yeah, I want to audition as a guitar player. So like, I auditioned, and John didn't get in the band, but I got in the band. And then it basically was like the first hardcore band I was in. And we played a whole bunch, we played that whole circuit, like A7 and CBGBs, and we had some good shows warming up for early versions of Agnostic Front, and we warmed up for Black Flag at the Reggae Lounge. We're like, holy shit, Black Flag!
Wow.
And then the band it just kind of came apart. But that kind of led me into kind of trying to be more like that. Little taste of being able to play live and kind of have friends who did the same thing was a big deal.
Nice.
I think once I got started, I think I was pretty clear. I was really interested in playing guitar in a band. Like I didn't want to go to music school, or I didn't want to like study composition seriously or anything. I was really into the rock and roll / hardcore punk format.
Gotcha. Yeah, you got the bug probably playing those live shows, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, it's really in time. And I was a really, really shy kid. Like I didn't, I had a lot of pimples and felt really unconfident. So like going and playing a show and hanging around with other people that were into it was like, it was really this strong feeling of like being able to fit in some way.
Wow. I mean, I can sort of imagine, but I can't imagine. I mean, that must have been such an incredible time and did you have a sense of how important it was at that time, or how big it was, the movement, like, playing at CBGBs, and playing with these, like Black Flag? Did you have a sense of like, holy shit, or was it just, oh, this is fun, this is like something cool to do?
You kind of had like, this is maybe funny to say. My impression was that I was getting involved too late. That everything cool had already happened. I don't know. It was hard to say. Like, I mean, it seemed pretty amazing to like just be able to, for me, get on a train and like go into the city and like see 6 bands or something like in the afternoon, and like they all seemed. I mean, I was able to hear them on the radio on like the hardcore show. So like that was like a big shift from, like hearing Hall and Oates,
right,
and then go into like a concert, like the Nassau Coliseum to see a show. It was like everybody was just, there were like 100 people or 200 people tops, and then at some of the shows there was 50 people. And so it felt like you could just go up and talk to people, or like the moment when I started playing in a band, I was like, oh, now it all makes sense. It's like you can just go see it. Everybody's just completely accessible. It's not like if you acted like a rock star, it was clear you were kind of a jerk.
Right. Yeah.
Just like, and you'd just be like, hey, do you guys have a warm-up band on your show? They're like, no, do you want to play? Yeah. Okay, I'll tell the club you can play. Hey, cool. You know, it
Right.
was like, um, in some ways the stakes seem really low. The excitement really high, but I don't think anybody thought that it was. I don't think anybody thought ahead as far as like, wow, this is going to be really popular in 5 years or 10 years, or it just didn't look that far ahead.
Yeah, kind of just living in the now of what it was, I guess, right?
Yeah, like you get another show out of it, that would be amazing. Or
Mm.
yeah, it's funny. I mean, it wasn't until like the so if that's 83, I don't know, when's the like first like Metallica, what year is the first Metallica album?
I think it was 83, 82 or 83. It was around the same time. Would have been around that same time. But I
Right,
don't
so
think they really exploded really until Master of Puppets when they toured with Ozzy. I think that's what really kind of seemed to really launch them. And that was what, 86,
yeah, 86,
I think.
87, maybe, right.
Yeah.
I think it's like that. I think it's that moment where like the heavy metal bands that were thrashy start to become like popular on that scale,
Yeah.
like where it was like, oh shit, like something could happen, in
Right.
83, like I don't, or 82, 83, I don't think it seemed like an alternative to everything.
Yeah. It's still very
And
underground.
then by 85, probably around, I think I hooked up with the guys that had formed Ludichrist somewhere around 85, and
Hmm.
I don't think we were thinking anything about success or anything like that. But somewhere in the next like 2 or 3 years, it seemed like, well, just by the sheer fact that our record label wanted to put out like in 83, there was, what was there? Touch and Go and Discord, and
Yeah. There
um,
wasn't much.
there wasn't kind of much. And it was pretty clear that those were like some guys in their, in like a house together with other guys that were like running the label.
Right.
But it was that moment where when you're like a couple bands started to have record labels wanted to get involved with bands that were somewhere like kind of hardcore thrash, that yeah, maybe there's something there. But even that, a lot of that just sort of went like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, didn't necessarily go so well for everybody. So if
Well, I
you
mean,
thought maybe it was going to go, then maybe after kind of that thing, you thought, well, maybe it's not going to go anywhere.
yeah. Well, I mean, you guys even got a little, I think you got a little airplay on MTV with This Party Sucks. I think that video made the rounds, which in this, then it's funny because now it doesn't seem so shocking, but at that time, I think to have a band called Ludichrist on MTV, that's revolutionary. I don't know if people would realize that now, like how, because anything that had any anti-religion sort of vibe at all was very taboo and frowned upon and attacked immediately. And now, I mean, you have everybody satanic. So, all the bands are
Right,
satanic,
right, right.
or, you know, but then it was, yeah, if you had any sort of alternative vibe, it seemed like it was shot down immediately by, big execs, especially MTV. So it was cool that, cause I remember seeing that. I think it was MTV, maybe it was VH1. I just remember seeing that video back then and going, oh, cool. Like, wow, this is awesome. Like, to
Yeah,
see hardcore stuff because you didn't ever see it. It was always, the bigger band, it was Night Ranger and stuff like that, as far as heavier type music. And then later, you had Headbangers Ball, but yeah, it was just cool to
right.
see that. I did want to ask you, I was really curious, especially with your art background. So, kind of after music, and I guess you went to art school, and of course you're an artist, but there was always it seems like with all of the bands you've been in, there's always been a visual prevalence as well, you know, specifically with the album cover artwork. And I know you, I read, at least I wanted to ask you this. I read that you had designed the first Ludichrist album cover. The great Ed Repka, of course, painted it, but I had read that you would actually come up with the design of that. Is that accurate?
It's yeah, it's accurate, but I should tell the anecdote because what happens is, like everything, you know, there always winds up being a whole bunch of different people involved in stuff. So the story of the album cover was, you know, like we just made made cassettes and T-shirts, like basically like, and flyers like every other band did. And I think the first artwork we had, I'm pretty sure of this, some things are blurry. The first artwork Tommy Christ made, which was like this Christ with praying hands, but he has like a punky hairdo. It's like Christ with like a punky hairdo, and his praying hands have like kind of Billy Idol gloves, you know, like those short leather, you know, like
Right
thing. So like, and he also made this like ransom note style Ludichrist kind of logo. And what was funny was, like, at that time, like that was kind of not the right style, right? Like the ransom note was like sort of like 1976 Sex Pistol, you know,
right.
so like it wasn't bad. It wasn't like people were like, but are you a punk band or are you a hardcore band? And the Christ thing I kind of always loved, but we only used it for a little while. And when we started making T-shirts, I don't know why we didn't use it. Maybe it seemed too, I don't know, too, I'm gonna say too sacrilegious, but like we wouldn't have cared. So the first bunch of T-shirts we made, I can't even remember why. Like it was kind of, I drew the first batch of T-shirts, and I think the design, or I know the design was like this Alfred E. Newman character who's like sort of holding, he was like kind of prancing around, like holding a cross, but the cross has like a funny hand on top of it that's like, and it's sort of like sort of, you know, uh like uh like just painting it all as this kind of like self-absorbed silliness. And so that, and then on the back there was like, it was maybe a little bit darker, there was like a crucifix that were made out of these little baby heads with sewn up mouths, you know, like they're like shrunken heads or something. And so we went through a couple of rounds of those T-shirts, and like I found somebody who silk screened them. Like all of these things were like, now you can just go online and be like T-shirts, and basically 2 clicks, like you find a place that does T-shirts. And but I think we had to like call places and like find a place that would do them, and it was like a much slower process. So fast forward, we go through a bunch of other T-shirts and stuff. We wind up getting there's a whole story in itself. We wind up on Combat Records at that point, and they're like, okay, we go through the process. We when we initially talked to Combat Records, and they were a subsidiary of Relativity Records. Relativity Records basically were an importer of heavy metal records. So they had a warehouse that was sort of by the airport, by JFK Airport, because basically they would get shipments. It was a shipping business. Okay. They get stuff and then distribute it. And then they kind of grew a little kind of record label out of it. So when we kind of went to meet with them the first time, they were like, look at all the cool metal records we're going to do. And I remember going home with a cassette of is this years? I mean, it's like 1986. It was like Peace Sells, but Who's Buying? Like the Megadeth album.
Nice.
I like, and we listened to it on Tommy's cassette player in his mother's station wagon that we had borrowed. Like, it's fucking amazing, right? So when it came time to record, we're like, who should we get for a producer? Like, we produce ourselves. Like, dude, get the guy from the Megadeth album. Like, those guitar sounds were amazing. So we like looked on the thing. We're like, we want Randy Burns. Let's get Randy Burns. So we got Randy Burns to produce the first Ludichrist record.
Nice.
And they were like, who knew we were such Megadeth fans? I think we just thought like in some ways the record company said, well, who do you want? And Dave Bett, who's like an amazing guy, he works for Sony these days. He's still kind of doing music related packaging, was the art director. And he said, well, look through all these books. Like, do you see a illustrator you kind of want to work with? And I had mentioned before Sean Taggart. Sean Taggart had already done like the first Crumbsuckers artwork.
Oh yeah,
and maybe
great work.
Yeah, it's like super. And maybe he had done the Agnostic Front, one of the Agnostic Front albums that was released, and he had just done, but it wasn't released, Crumbsuckers. And we're like, shit, he's really great, but like I feel like there were just like 2 New York releases that were like him, you know? So we got to do something different. We're like, okay, what about Ed Repka? You know, he's like, I think we were always really into this. Like, if we were supposed to go one way, we would try and go the other way. So like Ed did pretty much like super scary death metal things, you know? Yeah. And so we're like, let's get Ed Repka to do it. And we had no idea like what was involved at all. And Dave Bett was like, maybe Ed Repka had done a Death. Maybe Death was signed to that might have been, maybe they were, I get confused on if they had a relationship with Ed Repka already. So they were like, well, what should it be like? And the only stuff we could send him was the t-shirt. So Dave Bett sent him the t-shirt and wrote some notes. And basically he developed the album art from the t-shirt. But I don't think we saw, like, we literally didn't see anything until the album art was printed. You know, they're like, here's your come in, here's your records. You know, it went from absolutely not seeing anything to like, here's your record.
Oh wow.
And in my mind, like, I think Ed's artwork is like amazing, but in a totally different way than the t-shirt. Like, I kind of imagined that it was going to be funny or like goofy, and like Ed's thing is really funny, but it's more like also kind of scary at the same time.
Yeah, he's always got a darkness to what he does. So
yeah, it has real darkness. And you know, like the Alfred E. Newman kind of became I think we used to call it Rambo Christ. You know, it's like sort of like Tommy, but he was a little like Charles Manson meets Rambo, and he had like some more muscle, and it was like his pants were frayed somewhere in between like Lou Ferrigno, Bill Bixby as the Hulk when he turns into the Hulk, and for some reason his pants are zigzagged at the end. And the you know, the kind of little silly angels became kind of like morbid and stuff. But even more so, the thing that was like initially shocking was that it was pink.
Yeah.
Like, it's pink. And I think Tommy was like, that's amazing. And I was like, is it? I was like, it was such a leap from my expectation. And then over time I was like, this is super amazing, because who has a pink?
Yeah.
But like a crossover band has a pink album cover, and like,
right. Yeah.
In some ways, like, absolutely brilliant. Like,
yeah, especially at that time, that was such a different look than anything else that was happening. And I think, you know, kind of moving forward, you guys I know with Power Trip, and then with the first Scatterbrain, you know, you have the great Robert Williams. In fact, I've got it right here. I've got it. I mean, just such amazing artwork, and it ties in with what the sound is, I think, in such a great way too. And for me, you know, music is always, there's a visual aspect to it as well, at least for me. So, and I love art, but I guess I was curious, one, how you guys got involved with Robert Williams, and then also because of your art background, I was curious why you didn't do more design work. Uh,
Yeah,
you know.
that's a good question. Well, yeah, I mean, like, I've I first went to school for engineering,
Hmm.
and then because my family were kind of, my dad was an engineer, my older brother's an engineer, and then kind of pretty much figured I didn't want to do that. I went to school for painting, but in some ways, there seemed like there was more of a distance between painting and like graphic art at that point in time. Oh,
Yeah,
just literally because like the computer wasn't a thing, you
right.
know, like there were computers, but just think like the first desktop computer wasn't really distributed until kind of really a decade later,
Yeah.
after the 80s. So I did like t-shirts, I did flyers, fanzines and stuff like that. But in some ways, when we moved up to the to like when we did real stuff, you know, I think we were just all like we felt like there was somebody who knew what to do, that
Mm.
which wasn't us. And we should get somebody more knowledgeable than ourselves involved. I'm not, yeah, in retrospect, I kind of wonder if that was the. I mean, I love the Ed Repka stuff and the Robert Williams, but I'm not exactly sure why we didn't do it. We could have, or I could have.
Yeah, I mean, nothing. I was just curious. I love the album artwork. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Ed Repka and Robert Williams are two of my favorite artists. So, especially with album cover work, I think they do incredible stuff. But yeah, I was just, you know, knowing that you're an artist, I was curious, you know, if there
Yeah.
was that ever that temptation to like, hey, I want to do the album cover. Uh,
Robert Williams, we wound up with in a funny way, and I think everybody will remember it in a kind of different way. But I was studying engineering at Cooper Union in Manhattan, and to get to Penn Station to take the train to the suburbs, I always walked down 8th Street. 8th Street in 1983 was kind of more, you know, it was more trashy. You know, it was like a lot of weird clothes store. I mean, it was actually really busy, with like weird clothes stores and head shops and whatever. And upstairs, pretty close to 6th Avenue, upstairs, there was there was an art gallery that was called Psychedelic Solution,
hmm.
and I had stopped in there once or twice for others. I had stopped in and there was like a Mouse Kelly exhibit. So it was Stanley Mouse and his partner Anton Kelly, and they just they collected and then resold like first generation psychedelic rock posters. And I was like, I had seen those things reproduced a million times, but they actually, it's really different to see them in person.
right.
First, like they're much smaller than you sort of think they are. And some of the color is amazing, and some of the color is actually not that amazing, just kind of doesn't really work, you know? But like a lot of them are kind of like this big, you know, I
Oh,
guess like
wow.
that's the size of the thing they could print, or it was meant for a telephone pole or whatever. And then other things, of course, are bigger. So that gallery, I think I went back and I saw something else. Oh, I'm going to forget his name. There's a couple really great artists that of that type that were, like Robert Williams, that all sort of started to get popularized at the same time.
Hmm.
And I went back another time, and it was a Robert Williams exhibition, and I was absolutely fascinated, not just by his crazy artwork, but like his endless titling of the artworks.
Yeah.
Because each painting had 3 titles, and one would be really short, one would be like descriptive, and one would be like 2 paragraphs long. And the more you looked at the more you looked at them, the more obscene or absurd they were.
Right.
So I think for Power Trip, I have to go back and see, like, I think Appetite for Destruction had come out already. Maybe it had, or maybe it hadn't.
Around that same time.
It's right around that same time. Either we started talking to Robert Williams. No, I think it had came out already. And I was like, we should get this guy Robert Williams to do stuff. And everybody's like, yeah, okay. And then I think he sent, again, Dave Bett kind of contacted him and he sent stuff. And they were like, holy shit, it's the Guns N' Roses guy. And they were like, we somehow missed that like along the way. And we're like, that makes it even better. So he gave us maybe like 10 or 15 paintings that he would be willing to license for the artwork. And we went back and forth for a while. I can't remember what the other options were, but it seemed like the one we wound up with was a pretty clear winner. But in the end, he was actually pretty irritated because, and we were a little irritated, the record company or the distributor or somebody refused to print the album art, because if you look at your album cover, there's this woman on a gun, right?
Yeah.
And then there are kind of these nefarious characters that are kind of circling, like the Pope character, the alcoholic, lecherous, syphilitic Pope, the pirate guy, the burglar guy, Satan himself, and this kind of Nazi stormtrooper. And the Nazi stormtrooper had a swastika on his head. And the record label freaked out, and they were like, we can't have a swastika on it. So they just put a smiley face over it. A good solution. But Robert Williams got his copy and he was like, I can't change my artwork.
Yeah.
And it wigged out, and it was like, sent us a super angry letter. And but then, we thought, oh shit, that's the end of that, right? But then when we went back to him for Here Comes Trouble, he's like, he wasn't that mad anymore. It was like, okay, yeah, I think we can do something.
Yeah, and another great album cover too. That one's also very cool. I don't want to keep you all afternoon, but this is fascinating.
No.
I was curious about the transition from Ludichrist into Scatterbrain. I know basically Ludichrist essentially broke up, and then the three remaining musicians, yourself and Tommy and you guys formed Scatterbrain. I was kind of curious, and it's a similar sound, but there's some differences. And I was kind of curious kind of how that happened and why that happened, and if there was ever any thought of like, well, let's continue as Ludichrist, or was it like, no, that was something we did, now we need to do something different, or kind of how did that come about?
I mean, I think this is one of the kind of most interesting moments, and because over time we've told so many stories about it's like, it's one of those questions that people have actually asked us a decent amount of, and I think we've made a real effort to say a different thing every single time. So we've said like 150 different versions of what happened. So easiest way to answer is that we made Power Trip, and Power Trip was Tommy, myself, Paul, Dave Miranda, and Mike Walters. And I think Mike Walters left the band first after this arduous tour where it's just like, okay, that's enough. And then Dave had a lot going on. He had another band. He had a serious relationship. He had kind of all this stuff. So Dave, we kind of knew pretty early that Dave was like, if we started touring and we started doing stuff that like Dave might not, Dave probably wouldn't be able to do it. He was really upfront, but everybody loved Dave. And so, like do whatever you have to do to get some Dave in the band for a while. So at some point, kind of when Mike left, Paul had a guy that he knew who was named Guy, and Guy came into the band, and so it was Tommy, myself, Paul, Guy, and Dave Miranda, and we did a European tour together with that lineup, and we did a whole bunch of dates and started writing songs again. And then at some point it became kind of too much for Dave, like time commitment. So then Guy knew Mike Boyko, and maybe Paul knew him a bit too, because he was from the same town. Maybe somebody had played with him in a previous kind of high school band or rock band. So we got Mike, and so we had a whole series of Ludichrist shows, and the lineup was Tommy, me, Paul, Guy, and Mike. I can't remember. It would be hard to say how many. I almost imagine it was anything that happened between that European tour and the kind of record release. So, the big moments are usually you're either gearing up for a tour or you're writing for a record release. That's the two parts of the cycle. So when we got back after everybody passed out for a couple of days, we just started kind of writing the next record with that line, the next Ludichrist record with that lineup. And but of course, we had a totally different rhythm section than we had. And when we wrote Power Trip, Paul was pretty new in the band when we started writing it. And now, Paul and I had kind of been together, and that kind of core, Paul, Tommy, I have been together for a while. And Guy was really a solid bass player. Mike was much more of a kind of rock drummer. Like Al was a kind of punk drummer. He really was like a punk thrash drummer.
Right.
Dave was just like his own thing. He's like a prog jazz drummer. And then Mike was really like a rock or like a hard rock drummer. If you would put on the Motley Crue album, Mike would be like, that's what I'm saying. But he was also really into technicals. He was into being a good drummer. So he kind of went from hard rock to whatever, right? Because it was yeah, and that too. So when we started writing stuff, we were kind of much more solid. Plus, we learned a whole bunch of stuff when we worked with Tom Morris on Power Trip. We mostly learned that we sucked at keeping time. We're super bad. We would just start playing, and everybody's we just went faster and faster until nobody could play. So as soon as we started writing, we started kind of figuring out tempos and working with click tracks. We actually wrote to prepare for recording rather than to write, because it was the third time I was going through it, and the second time Paul was going through it. And so we wrote some songs. And the thing was, the record company didn't love Power Trip album. Actually, they hated it.
Really?
They didn't give us any money to record. I mean, they didn't give us any money to tour. They put a couple ads out, 1 or 2 ads out, but they were pretty much making clear noises that there was no third record. I mean, well, we're going to make one. I don't know if you want to put it out. Otherwise, we'll just figure something out. So, believe it or not, I'm going to actually answer the question in a minute.
No, this is fascinating.
Super long story. So, so at that point, 2 guys came. Well, first I should say the first Ludichrist record was Combat. The second was Combat Core. Power Trip was Combat Core. Then by the third, new people had come to combat. One was Howie Abrams, who was doing something at Relativity, but I think he was kind of working in distribution, and he like came up and now was like he knew what was happening. He also kind of was a big music fan, so he kind of started to be able to kind of steer things a bit, or steer things a lot. And a guy named Steve Martin, who was maybe Steve was originally like one of the guitar players in the FUs or Jerry's Kid. He was something in Boston, I forget. And then he was also playing in Agnostic Front at that point. And Steve was just like a smart guy, and you know he's gone on, and I think he still is like a music publicist, manager. He does kind of pretty big acts. But Howie and Steve came on and started In Effect Records. So it was like we were signed to the label. All of a sudden, there was a new label at the label.
Oh, okay.
And I remember Howie, and maybe it was Howie and Steve coming to rehearsals. We just used to rehearse and write these songs out in Long Island. And Howie came out and he was like, he sat through a rehearsal and he's like, "This is amazing. You guys are amazing." And we were like, "Yeah, of course we're amazing. Like, we've been telling you that. Like, we're telling everybody that the whole time. We work super hard, you know. It's like, it's amazing." And he's like, "No, but like, it's like so much better than like than Power Trip." I'm like, "Well, we've been practicing a lot, you know. It's like it's like, you know, he's basically getting that like nobody really loved Power Trip at that point. So like, okay." Then there was kind of this enthusiasm for the next album, which didn't have a title yet. I'm like, "Yeah, it could be great, whatever." Steve and Howie, and they were like, "Yeah, you should be on this new label that we're kind of starting within the label called In Effect." I'm like, sounds good. We don't, what do we know, right? Like, you say it's good, it's good. We don't know how that stuff works. And so they got excited. We got a different producer to record it, a guy named Tom Soares up in Rhode Island, who had done stuff. We really liked the Leeway album, and Tom had done Leeway. He'd done a bunch of other stuff. Cool. Met with him. He seemed great. We went up, we recorded it, worked on the packaging, got Robert Williams. So basically, up to this point, it's the Ludichrist album, right? Then suddenly, there's a problem with the distribution. Like, so in the South, there used to be this company called Peaches that distributed like to anything kind of like that was considered the South, and they were Christian. I mean, they were like born again Christian or something. So we skated by, like nobody really noticed Ludichrist. Nobody. I mean, I think very early on, maybe a tape manufacturer said, "We're not going to do your cassette tape." Oh, a sticker. We had stickers, like bumper stickers, and we, you know, it was like in some industrial park, and you give them the artwork and like some cash, and then you come back a week later and they give you their bumper stickers. And you know, the guy called back and he was like, "I just looked at the art and there's like a picture of Jesus on this thing. Listen, there's no way we're printing this." Like, okay, I'll come get the like $80 back or whatever. So like, this is the first time we ran into any real resistance on anything. They're like, Peaches is not going to distribute it, which means it's just going to cut like the sales by like 50%. And we're like, we don't know anything. We're like, "Is that a big deal?" You know, they're like, "Yeah, it's it's a huge big deal. We think it could be a really great record." And like, I'm like, "Okay, like, so what are you saying?" And they're like, "Well, do you guys want to consider a name change?" I'm like, "No, I don't know." You know, the first reaction is like, "No, fuck you." Like, "Way, we'll die first." And they were like, "Well, I don't know. Like, we've already recorded the album." You know, it's like, okay, when you do stuff, you just do it. You know, like, you don't think, now I'm going to write a masterpiece, or now I'm going to record the best album. you just gonna record as best you can,
Yeah.
and certain things come out good, or like the timing's good, or you did a better job preparing for it. There's some magic. So we had already heard the album. We thought it was actually really good too, and we're like, does it just remain Ludichrist and somehow gets a little bit tanked, and we kind of make up the difference later? Like we had no idea how to assess it. So I can't remember. I remember having some discussions. I can't remember how we came to any conclusion. And we're like, okay, yeah, let's change the name. But like, what the hell do we change the name to? Like, we've been Ludichrist for a really long time now.
All right.
So I can't remember whose idea it was, but the record label held a contest to like name us.
Oh, really?
And, people sent in like 5,000 kind of names. They were all like child baby head eaters, the anal mutilators. They're kind of amazing. We're like, yeah, let's be that. And at some point we're like, okay, Scatterbrain sounds right. Maybe it was, I can't even remember if it was Paul. Like, the only person who would have known Jeff Beck's Scatterbrain would have been Paul at that point. So maybe he suggested it and we went with it. Or I know there were a lot of names in play for a while, and we just weren't sure what to do. But also we did feel like it was, like, if you look back, in my mind, it was just the band and like people coming in and out of the band, right? Like, we're just trying to write the next record. But it was really radically different band. Like,
yeah,
where like just even changing the rhythm section, and like that we really moved more away from from like beats that were like tip tap tip tap tip tap tip tap tip tap, like skipping beats or whatever, to like more like rock beats.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure why. It wasn't like, let's write a rock album, or but that's what we wound up with. So we kind of decided to switch the name.
That makes sense.
But we've told, and if you talk to Tommy, or you talk to Guy, or you talk to somebody else, they may tell you the exact opposite, which could also be true. Like, my perspective is sort of like this linear flow. It's just like time's going on. But there wasn't really like a like, if there was a breakup moment, it would have been like, well, Dave Miranda left, so let's break up the band.
Yeah.
But we just like, I have a great VHS tape of us playing Milwaukee Metal Fest. And what's funny is like 50% of this, and it's the Scatterbrain lineup, which we played a whole bunch of Ludichrist shows with the Scatterbrain lineup. And the set is really funny, because it's like, it's 50% Power Trip, or it's like 70% Power Trip, and then there are a whole bunch of the Scatterbrain songs, which we must have been kind of writing, but they're kind of more like, they're played more thrashier.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Must have been like we hadn't figured out the tempos yet, or it's kind of interesting.
That'd be really fascinating to hear. Yeah, kind of I'm always fascinated by the writing process anyway, and so kind of the evolution of a song is really interesting to me. Like, I love, like, I know some people don't, but I love demo tapes. I love listening to that stuff. I find it really interesting. Even if the sound quality sucks, I don't care. Like, I find it really fascinating to listen to. And maybe it's my age, because I come from the age probably taping songs off of the radio,
Totally.
which sounded awful. Some of the, sometimes they were okay, but I mean, I remember my first tape recorder, I didn't even have like a stereo, so I would have like a tape, like the old fashioned tape recorder next to the radio, and
Right,
like
right.
everybody be really quiet for 5 minutes. Like,
Yeah, I
and
did
the
that
dog
too.
would bark like shit.
Right, it's like the tape, the tape player with the handle on it, like the
Yeah,
switch.
exactly. Yeah.
Put it next to the radio,
Yep.
because then you could have music. You could control when you heard the music instead of just turning on the radio.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's funny. Wow.
Yeah, the
That's so cool.
songwriting
That's
process was always interesting. It's like on most of the well, on the Ludicrous stuff, you'd have to talk about like how the first songs got written. But somebody was just talking about this the other day, and I thought it was like super. I got or like I was writing about it, and I kind of changed my mind when I finished. And we were talking about the same thing, like the transition from Ludichrist to Scatterbrain. And then I was kind of writing on another post that was literally about, it was back and forth with the first guitar player, Mark Canabrocki. And of course, he knew stuff that I didn't know because, like he started Ludichrist with Al, the first drummer. And when I came into the group, like they had like 6 songs or 7 songs.
oh, okay.
And so Mark was saying, oh yeah, we wrote some of those songs, and then Alan wrote some of them, and then we got really psyched about Discharge. The Discharge, Hear Nothing, See Nothing, Say Nothing album came out, and it like blew our minds. Just absolutely blew our minds. So basically, everything from that point on was like we tried to be like Discharge. So there are these first kind of songs that are sort of Al writing or Al and Mark writing, and then they get Chuck in the band, and then they get Tommy in the band. When Tommy comes in the band, then sometimes they write the song and then Tommy writes the lyrics. But there's 1 or 2 instances where Tommy has an idea for a song, and then the band kind of plays music to it. But and then the songs tend to be like, once I got involved, the songs tend to be we write music and like the whole song, and then Tommy puts lyrics on top of them. And in most instances, like through my entire thing, that was sort of the structure. It was like we'd write some crazy thing, and then Tommy would just write lyrics. Sometimes he'd come back and say, can you not play that part? On me, or like I can't do anything over that part, like get rid of it. But a lot of the time we would just kind of work out all these changes, and then it would be more likely that Paul would throw something in my song, or would kind of have a riff that's floating around, and then we but it tended to be like I would work out a kind of set of riffs and bring it to the band, and we kind of get it working, and then Tommy would take it home and do lyrics, or Paul would kind of bring in a set of riffs, play them, evolve them, whatever, till it got to a point, and then basically give it to Tommy, and then he would do lyrics. So in relationship to Ludichrist, I left out a bunch of detail, but the relationship between Ludichrist to Scatterbrain, I thought when I started thinking about it, it's like, there kind of was like the first band, and then there was like Alan Mark band, and then there was the Al Mark Tommy band. Then there was like the Al Mark Tommy, Chuck's in there as well, of course, Glen band, because then once I kind of came in, that we started kind of doing some different riffs and changing stuff around, a couple new songs. Then when we had Joe Butcher, Joe came in and he brought a song or 2 songs in. Then we had kind of Mike Walters and Dave Miranda, which was, and Paul came in. So it was like, Ludichrist actually was like, if you really looked at it, was like, there were probably like 7 different bands that we just called Ludichrist, because right. Because by the time anybody heard him, Tommy was the singer, and then, the background of it changed. But how the music was put together or who was doing what kind of could change pretty radically. But this is a guitar player's perspective, right?
Right.
If you're just like a Ludicrist fan, you're like, as long as the singer guy is standing up, you're like, it's good. Like, I came to the right show. That's the guy.
Right,
I know the
that's the guy.
song. Yeah. But to be like one of the guys who makes the sausage. So the shift to Scatterbrain in some ways didn't seem so radical to me, because
Right.
we had done that shift several times before.
Gotcha. So it was really just a name change, really, is what it came down to be. Interesting. That's fascinating. That's a really,
in my opinion, but
yeah.
I also some people have been posting articles, like from like, we did a bunch of Australian shows, and one of the interviews really great. It's like, I just want to make 100% clear, Ludichrist blew up in flames. Nobody would even talk to each other, and we knew that we could never play together again. And then we decided to start this new band. It was called Scatterbrain. Like, sure,
Yeah, that's what happened.
Good, right? Like, I don't think we're making like historical documents. So we probably should think of this as making entertainment. And in that case, like, whatever anybody felt like the truth was, or it seems good to me.
Nice. I like that. That's great. Well, Glenn, this has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you, and really an honor, truly. This has been so fun, and really fascinating. Thank you so much. For the listeners, for the people watching this, please look in the description below. There's links to Stone Deep's pages. So check them out if you haven't heard them already. Great band, really cool stuff. And you can buy 8 tracks, brand new 8 tracks of Stone Deep. So very cool. So Glenn, thank you again. This has been an absolute this was great. This is a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
No, same here. Really enjoyed talking, and just super.
Great. Thank you.